Welcome to our second In Conversation today. We'll be discussing analog to digital transition in group living environments. What a year 2020 has been for us all. As we reacted as tech sector to the pressures of the pandemic, what a pressure it's put on all of us. But COVID has shined a light on technology and how it plays a huge role in health and care and well-being of individuals in our communities. People living in their own homes and in group dwellings, sheltered housing and extra care schemes, we've just, looked after them and digital's just become part of their life. I'm delighted to be joined by Saeed Choudhary, R&D Director at Legrand Assisted Living and Healthcare, and he's kindly offered to answer some of my burning questions. So over to you, Saeed. With no pressure, what impact has COVID had upon the technology-enabled care of sheltered, particularly, and extra care schemes?
Firstly, I'd just like to thank you, Alyson, for having me and giving me this opportunity to go through it. So, COVID has certainly put technology-enabled care into the spotlight, from tablets connecting, shielding relatives to GPs now using video conferencing. The role of digital can play an important part in improving health and well-being and is better understood and more visible than ever. Going to your question, this is especially the case in sheltered and extra care housing. During the pandemic, many social landlords have had to rely on monitoring and communication systems to support their vulnerable residents and keeping them safe, and also enhancing the quality of life by eliminating social isolation, which was a real risk during the summer and during this current lockdown. Some supporting housing providers have also moved from a reactive approach to one where it's more proactive. For example, data from the tech systems has been used to identify residents that are at risk of falling and putting in preventative measures, going out, seeing them, replacing their slippers, putting in extra support, and also offering daily reminder calls for people to take their medication, to keep drinking, and all these other things that can cause decline, as well as just that bit of social contact. Does that kind of touch on the points you were after?
Absolutely. I think we just wanted to hear sheltered housing, as we know, is it's the hybrid of that community base, and it's just to hear from you how you found it during COVID. And COVID pandemic, has it forced digital shift faster than we would have without it? Because we're seeing it in lots of areas, but it would be good to hear from you from a Legrand perspective, what that looked like for you.
That's a really good question. The beauty of digital isn't just its ability to learn patterns and offer extra services and all these kind of wonderful things people talk about, big data. The true value lies in how it can help that person to understand and self-manage their health, increasing their independence and choice and control. Also kind of helping to reduce some of the pressures that social landlords have to face, because you can focus the resources we've got on the individuals that need it the most and keep in contact with everyone else through video calls, etc. Operating too, digital has supported housing providers through the pandemic by enabling rapid deployment of plug and play. So where we've had people shielding, we can actually send out equipment that can be managed and configured from the cloud, allowing more flexible alarm handling and helping large parts of the care team to work from home.
No.
Although COVID may have lifted the lid on digital technology and the possibilities presented, challenge now is whether housing providers can unleash the digital premium. Shockingly, I've seen a lot of people in this sector still doing the procurement side, remaining on the old legacy analog technologies, which is a challenge to introducing new services and offering better care for our residents.
Okay, I've certainly seen some of this where we've been working on the Department of Health programme, supporting working from home, being able to keep our staff and our residents safe and continuation of service. So we are seeing that the older systems and people who haven't moved into the digital platforms are really struggling to do some of those basic things that we've had to do during COVID. I think if I look back on my days in Newcastle and I was faced with the digital shift, as a non-technical person, I would want to know, what does it really mean? Um, and how should we be preparing for it? And I'm sure there's like-minded people, as we know when we talk to lots of our members in TSA. What does it really mean from your perspective, Saeed? What sound advice could you give to like-minded people like me who just need to navigate through all of this noise?
Okay, well, that's a really good question, gets to the heart of the matter. The first thing I'd say is the pandemic has changed the way a lot of centres work. I mean, a lot of people that we partner with, the new normal is to have 50% of your staff working from home. And I think that will continue because it just gives a lot more flexibility to the whole service. I mean, the digital switchover, I mean, we're 5 years away from when they're going to turn off analog phone lines. So old technology, tone-based protocols are going to really struggle on the new digital networks. But we've also got to remember that providers of telecom providers have already started making changes to their systems in the background. And when I talk to customers, they're finding more and more calls are failing. They're having more stress around what to do with because you get a call coming in, but it just doesn't connect. And that means there's a lot of failed calls to deal with, equipment retrying, and
Yeah.
it kind of puts the whole service under strain because you don't know if that person has actually got a true emergency. Was it just unless you establish that communication path with them. So centres across the country are seeing this rapid increase in failing technology. So I think the digital switchover is really a wake up call, but it's not the start of the journey, it's the end. We should be ready for it now and we
Yeah.
should be kind of future proofing ourselves because when we get to, I mean, 2025, there won't be any phone lines. And, you know, the kind of reliance we've had on the power that comes from them to keep the devices going, that's just going to be gone. We're going to have maybe small boxes in the house with a single AA battery, and that will give you 30 minutes of runtime if you've got a power outage, and then you lose all connectivity with the vulnerable adult. And the other thing I'd say is that, you know, in fact, from 2023, it'll be impossible to actually buy an analog phone line from BT. So it's a whole journey, but a lot of people have started 2, 3 years ago. And I'd say that that's where we need to be. We need to be ready to have completed the transition by 2025, not start it then. Have I
Yeah.
kind of touched on all the points you were looking for?
I think so, Saeed, and you've mentioned some of the implications there, and you know that TSA have been doing a lot of work with our members, our commissioners, to try and raise the knowledge and make them into informed buyers so they know what they're buying. But is there any other implications that we've missed out there that we could share with the audience listening to this discussion today?
I think it's very important to, I mean, we work very closely with a lot of the telecom providers in the UK and in Europe. And a few years ago, there's a shift in legislation so that telecom providers have no longer a legal obligation to support tone-based signaling. That doesn't mean they're going to turn it off, but it means in the past, when they introduced new equipment, they had to make sure devices like our assisted living alarms, the sheltered housing schemes would work with any equipment they put in. They don't have to do that anymore. And as they're trying to bring in more calls through their network, they're optimizing the way it works. So as I said, we're seeing failures increase throughout the UK as time goes on. And not for a minute am I suggesting that analog devices will stop working overnight, but we'll get to the situation where maybe 10% of calls fail, then 20%. And you can imagine what a nightmare that's going to be for everyone involved in the sector.
Yeah.
And the other thing to kind of look at is with the pandemic, we've had everybody's working from home now. There's been so much use of mobile networks and telephony networks that's put even more strain on it. So there's a lot of challenges about that kind of reliability. In the old days, an analog phone line was 99.999% reliable.
Yeah.
We can't rely on that anymore. So digital brings new opportunities and new flexibilities because these devices go over the internet. They use cellular communication, so you can just put a device in the mail. It arrives in someone's house. It's ready to go, and it can use many different routes to get to the center. And also, it gives its health and its status. So, I mean, one of the things I remember from a few years ago was a village where somebody stole all the copper phone line. Can you imagine if you were the centre that was monitoring them? I mean, what would you do to support if it's an absolute nightmare? Now we can tell if one of the digital devices is connected, if it's alive, whether the pendant's in range. So it gives a much more holistic view of the person before they put the alarm call in.
No, fantastic. I'm sure that'll be really helpful. I think my next question is regulation. We talk about regulation in terms of service delivery, CQC, our quality standards framework. But as we move into that digital world, particularly around group dwellings and or sheltered and or extra care, I know that you've been involved in a new BSA standard, BS 8521, that 2020 standard. What implications does that have, and what reassurances does it give us?
Well, it's really simple. Basically, the use of standards in any industry makes sure everything just works. It's as simple as that. And in particular, in our industry, the new BS 8521 standard means that all the devices in the field and all the centers that support it speak the same language. So if you buy a product from one manufacturer and you buy an ARC or a monitoring center from someone else, they speak the same language. But not only that, the way they handle their peripherals, the way the calls are coming in, it's all preset and predefined by the standard. So there's no ambiguity and no misunderstanding. I mean, I've seen over the years where you might have two schemes, assisted living schemes. They both have similar types of peripherals. They're using the same protocol theoretically. It's a proprietary protocol. One manufacturer may have interpreted it in one way, one interpreted it the way. They put the call in, and you get two different messages in front of the operator. And that can be a real challenge when you're trying to triage calls and deal with them. So being able to make everything just work is reassuring, and it kind of simplifies that kind of whole procurement process, because if you kind of stick with standards, everybody's bought into them, and it's, you know, you're adhering to best practice. And I think that's key with this new digital world, because, you know, the whole internet and everything else that's out there works because it's all based on standards. So I think we need to kind of adopt that in tech as well.
Yeah.
And I think BS 8521 is a real kind of game changer. Every single manufacturer has been involved in its development, from Legrand and all the others out there. And I mean, it's hard to believe, but the work started 9 years ago, actually 2009, and it was kind of started with the tech body, the TSA. They kind of chaired the meetings and helped deliver the thing. I myself, Chris Dodd, our MD, we worked with it, and I said, all the manufacturers, and it's been a joint effort, and it's taken best practices from Europe, best practices in technologies from the internet to deliver something that's robust and sound and meets our sector's needs. And I think, I mean, initially it was called Now IP, and I think it's really important to point out that it's been in use since 2015. So it's a mature, well-tested technology. So it's not like some newfangled thing that doesn't quite work in our sector. It's proven. It's based on the BSI 8521 analog standard. So all the kind of knowledge about peripherals, assisted living, and telecare is baked into it. So it's totally designed for our sector, but it supports everything we used to do, but it's a pathway to offer new services going forward. You know, video calls, habit monitoring, because it's always connected. We know that the resident's being continually protected.
Oh, fabulous. And I think the TSA have been involved in that standard for many years. And now our quality on tech quality, we have our representatives from there who would be willing to talk through that standard with any of your customers who wanted to come to the TSA and tech quality to get some reassurance of what that really means in terms of service delivery. So fantastic. And you know what our ethos is about quality and improvement, but really about safety too. And I think standards gives you those things. So I think to conclude, I think for me, Saeed, is what are the benefits? I know we all talk about the benefits, you know, our new proactive and preventative care models where we want to get everybody to real good outcomes for people. But by migrating to digital, from your perspective, what do you think the benefits are to those service providers and those customers?
Before I kind of get into the really good benefits we have, I think it's really important that we touch on some of the implications, because one of the differences between the new digital world and the world we're used to is in the past, we relied on BT's telephone network. So you bought equipment, just plugged it into the BT sockets on the wall. You bought your ARC, you plugged that into the BT sockets and it just worked. So there's a lot more around the infrastructure, but and sometimes this causes confusion for people involved in procurement, uh, uh, housing managers, etc. But it's all about ensuring that connectivity needs to be secure and safe between the scheme or the individual in it with the dispersed unit and the ARC. And I think that's another factor where maybe the TSA can help and guide people, because I think we need the right processes and practices in place, and to ensure, you know, that we adhere to all the best practices around cybersecurity, safety, and reliability. You know, it's not as simple as just like getting a broadband connection put in place and plugging your computer in and surfing the internet. It, we need to ensure that there's multiple paths for the alarm to work. If one connection doesn't work, hackers can't come in and interfere. And all the suppliers in the sector worked hard on that, and I know the TSA worked on a best practice guide for that. And I think it's really important that people engage with those messages, and there's proven ways of doing this, and partnering with the right organization can totally help you through that. So going back to your original question on the benefits, so I would say, first of all, flexibility. That's the key thing from this year. Uh, we've needed to be really flexible and agile in the way we've delivered care and to support the people that rely on us. So tech equipment manufacturers manufactured to these open standards guarantee interruptibility, so we can use equipment from one manufacturer or another, depending on what the needs of the residents are and how we can best meet them. Uh, it also means that you can allow people to work from home. The calls can be routed because it's going over the internet and cellular. You you're no longer forced to have the ARC in a silo. It can be distributed, so you know you can mitigate risks from flooding, COVID. I mean, I've seen centres have to close down because they've been invaded by rats and all these kind of things, without the level of service going down.
Yeah.
And also, you know, in the past it might take 30 minutes to go from your main site to your DR where you're not being able to handle calls. With digital, you can switch over instantly and handle those calls from anywhere. So you might have a problem at your main center, you switch everything to your disaster recovery, but your operators might be sat in the car park with a laptop and a mobile phone handling the calls and don't actually have to drive 40 minutes down the road. So there's I've seen really great ways our partners out there have been using digital to kind of make their lives easier and also offer better services and optimize the way they work. Future proofing. I think that's the key, because there's a level of service we offer with tech, which is you raise an alarm and someone comes to your aid, and all the digital solutions will provide that, but they also give these new constantly connected routes into the house. So you can turn off the lights, you can increase the heating in the house if you've got a connected home solution. You can mitigate the need for people to go and visit the doctor by taking health readings. I mean, some of the kind of things we're looking at on the continent is having more video conferencing, so we can, in fact, triage. If you get a call with no audio, you can actually look to see what's going on, to see if a person's fallen, or whether it's just a false alarm. So there's all these great things that can come from that, but you have to be on that pathway and have that connectivity in place. It's almost like saying, we're all used to having Netflix and all these great services because we've got really good broadband. But imagine if you still were using those dial-up modems that I remember, that, with the ping ping noises and going off. You just wouldn't be able to make any kind of way in this new world that we live in.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect. But the other key things are cost savings. A lot of costs associated with the calls we make from group living systems. With things like BS 8521, all the audio is voice over IP, so it's over an internet connection. So you can have communication with your residents backwards and forwards all day long without massive phone bills coming in. Reliability, because you've got multiple paths, you can get the calls going over the internet or a cellular modem. You kind of are ensured that you've got, and the biggest one for me, and it's the thing that always surprised me about group living, was that with the old systems, you could only have one or two calls to the ARC. So if I press my pendant to pull my pull cord and I'm having a great conversation with the operator, I'm blocking all the other calls. You don't have any of that queuing on a digital system. If someone's got an alert, it comes straight through. You can have as many residents from a group living scheme talking to the ARC offsite, or even another advantage of digital is that your wardens can be more flexible because we can deliver the calls to them over an IP connection to their mobile phone. So, gone are the days where you had to have a special handset in the scheme. So it's that kind of whole kind of flexibility around it. But it's also the fact that it enables the evolution of proactive measures. So if you haven't got any call charges, and it's so simple to call in and check up on the residents. You can have programs to do reminder calls, welfare calls.
Yeah.
I think I've touched on most of the benefits that
I think you
come
have.
to
And
mind.
my days 7.5 years ago in Newcastle, so my responsibility was for all of the learning disability sites, all of our sheltered housing. This does open opportunities to modernise your frontline services in those group dwellings. And one of the biggest things about sheltered was sustaining a resident to end life. From my opinion, it allows us in group dwelling systems to use digital in a much more proactive way to sustain them in their tenancy too. So I think what I've heard today, Saeed, is excellent, and I'm sure whoever dives into this online or on the website will find it really useful. So thank you for your time today. Around analog to digital and Legrand will be included in the webinar. There's a webinar from TSA on the 15th of December. It is focusing on dispersed alarms, but I think we all need to keep this conversation going. We launched that white paper in 2017 when we first start talking to our colleagues at Ofcom and BT. 2025 is round the corner, and we don't need to wait until then to decide that things aren't going to work. COVID's taught us to respond quickly. So this is a brilliant start of a conversation, Saeed, and I'm sure you'll have lots of customers and potential customers out there that wants to continue that conversation with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. And I also like to say that another good starting point is the Good Governance Institute's white paper on unleashing the digital premium. So, as you said, tech services, the TSA have published a number of resources in this. So we're here. I mean, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone out there regarding digital. And this isn't from a Legrand perspective, but this is from my work in CEN, and the BSI. And as I said, I've worked with the TSA in the past on special interest groups, and I think we're all here to support people through this,
Yeah.
regardless of using our kit or not.
Absolutely, Saeed. And one of our main core values in the TSA is about making a difference, but being stronger together. So the more we
Absolutely.
work with our collective community of TSA suppliers and service providers and government, we will help this transition through analog to digital, but come out of it with really fabulous new services. And the most important thing, improving outcomes for people. And I think we all agree that that's why we're here, and that's why we're still in this sector trying to make a real difference for people's lives. So thank you.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed this
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you.